They humiliated her in front of a full cabin because of the color of her skin, and they thought they'd get away with it. A black woman, calm, composed, quietly seated in first class, asked for something simply drink, a moment of dignity. Instead, she was denied, mocked, and publicly moved to the back of the plane as though she didn't belong. No outburst came, just a silence that said she'd seen this before. But what the crew didn't know was that this time they picked the wrong woman. What unfolded next unraveled every layer of control they believed they held. This wasn't just about a drink or a flight. It was about power abused, prejudice veiled behind professionalism, and a system so used to ignoring quiet resistance that it failed to recognize the strength sitting right in front of it. Margaret Ellis stepped onto Flight 327 with quiet determination. Her posture, upright and sure, reflected a lifetime of earned grace. Dressed in pressed slacks, a navy blouse, and low-heeled shoes, her gray curls were tucked under a travel hat, her presence as dignified as it was unassuming. The first-class cabin gleamed with soft leather, polished accents, and muted tones of exclusivity. Margaret moved with ease down the narrow aisle, her boarding pass already in hand, locating her seat at 2A. At the front, the lead flight attendant, Cassandra, in mid-40s, hair pulled into a tight bun, expression professional but cold, glanced at her ticket. A green light confirmed everything was in order. Still, Cassandra hesitated, long enough for the disdain to flicker in her eyes before gesturing toward the seat. Margaret returned a small, polite nod and sat. She placed her bag beneath the seat and pulled out a book from her coat pocket. Around her, the other passengers immersed themselves in devices and beverages. No one greeted her. She didn't expect them to. Margaret opened her book and began reading as the plane began to taxi. Cassandra moved down the aisle, focused on her checklist, barely sparing Margaret a glance. When the aircraft leveled out after takeoff, beverage service began. Cassandra distributed drinks with automatic grace, her smile reserved for certain passengers. When the cart reached Margaret's row, she quietly requested ginger ale. Cassandra nodded but didn't speak. The cart moved on. 10 minutes passed. The man beside her received his whiskey on ice. A woman behind her asked for lemon water and got it instantly. But Margaret's ginger ale never came. She waited 5 more minutes, then gently said as Cassandra passed again, "Pardon me, I believe my drink was missed." Cassandra replied, "We're out of ginger ale," and walked away. Margaret blinked. Just 1 row ahead, a man was being handed a fresh can of ginger ale from the galley. No apology. No explanation. She didn't react. Instead, she took out a small notepad from her purse and wrote a brief note. She closed it, placed it beside her book, and resumed reading. Her posture hadn't changed, but something had hardened behind her eyes. Cassandra continued down the aisle, the service flawless for everyone else. But each time she passed Margaret, her jaw clenched slightly. She had expected gratitude, maybe meekness. Instead, she got composure. And that composure unnerved her. Across the aisle, a man had been watching. Business casual, mid-30s, laptop open. He'd seen the drink skipped, the second denial, the way Cassandra moved past Margaret like she didn't exist. He tapped a note into his phone, 2A denied twice. Margaret closed her book again and leaned back, breathing slowly. She was familiar with this brand of dismissal, the kind dressed in civility but soaked in bias. Ginger ale was not the issue. Presence was. A man seated beside her activated the call button. When Cassandra returned, her smile was sudden, wide. "Would you like something to drink, sir?" He asked for coffee, then added, "She's still waiting on her ginger ale, by the way." Cassandra hesitated. "We ran out," she repeated tightly. The man looked at Margaret. "That's strange. I thought I saw some brought from the back." Margaret offered a quiet smile. "You saw correctly." Cassandra returned later with his coffee, avoiding Margaret's gaze. Turbulence nudged the aircraft. The captain's voice announced a patch of light roughness. Cassandra resumed walking the cabin, checking seatbelts, placing hands gently on shoulders, smiling. Eventually, she returned to Margaret. "Is there anything else I can assist you with, ma'am?" Margaret replied softly. "Only if your kindness is offered to all." Cassandra didn't respond. She turned and walked away. An hour later, Margaret pressed the service button again. This time, a younger attendant arrived. Margaret requested to speak with the captain. The attendant hesitated, then nodded. Cassandra returned. The captain is currently occupied. Is there a problem? I'd like clarity, Margaret replied. Cassandra said nothing more. Minutes passed. Then the cockpit door opened, and a man in uniform stepped into the aisle. His badge read Captain R. Carver. I understand you had a concern, he said. Margaret calmly explained the series of events. The captain glanced at Cassandra, who stood stone-faced. I'm sure it wasn't intentional, he replied. There's no need for assumptions. Margaret said evenly. I'm not assuming. I'm observing. The captain nodded once and walked away. Cassandra followed. The man across the aisle leaned over. That was clear, he whispered. Soon after, a woman named Elise, sitting in 3C, leaned forward. Why was she denied what others were given? Cassandra replied curtly. Crew decisions aren't subject to passenger debate. Then maybe the passenger deserves an answer, Elise said louder. Heads turned. Cassandra snapped. Ma'am, please refrain from interfering with cabin operations, or we may have to take further steps. Margaret met Elise's eyes, offering a quiet warning. Elise sat back. Moments later, Cassandra returned, this time with another attendant, taller, voice flat. He said to Margaret, We've received complaints about your behavior. We'll need to relocate you. I've remained seated the entire flight, she said. It's a matter of comfort for all passengers, he said firmly. Elise began to rise in protest. This is ridiculous. Further disruption will result in removal, the man said sharply. Margaret stood. Her movements were calm, deliberate. She carried her bag and followed them to the rear. Some passengers stared. Some averted their eyes. They seated her in a cramped row near the restrooms. The smell of metal and cleaning fluid filled the air. Still, Margaret sat with her back straight. A younger attendant passed by. Can I get you anything? She whispered. No. Thank you, Margaret replied. In the front, Elise opened her laptop and began typing. She titled her piece, Same Sky, Different Rules. Margaret wrote, too. She noted names, times, events not for revenge, but record. The plane began its descent. Someone murmured, Some people just want attention. Someone else whispered, It's always about race with them. A teenage boy removed his headphones. It's just a seat. In the galley, Cassandra refilled pitchers. They know how to play the system, she told another attendant. Do you think she planned it? The girl asked. Of course she did. These types always do. Elise made her way down the aisle, passing Margaret. May I sit here? She asked. Margaret nodded slowly. They're rewriting the moment while it's still happening, Margaret said. Not if I write it first, Elise replied. Then write, Margaret whispered. Always. When the plane landed, Margaret requested to speak with someone from corporate. Cassandra refused. Margaret insisted. Rebecca reached for her boarding pass. We don't need this anymore, she said, tearing it. That document belongs to me, Margaret said. Not once it's processed, Cassandra replied. Elise captured the exchange word for word. Outside the plane, Margaret was approached by gate agents. Elise stepped forward. She's not alone, Margaret said. I'll speak if it's recorded. Far across the terminal, Jordan Elise, a man in a tailored suit, received a message. His mother had been mistreated on a flight. He walked toward the operations center. Jordan wasn't just a concerned son. He was a regulatory consultant to the FAA. Within minutes, he had accessed service logs, manifests, audio clips. He initiated an internal review. The crew of Flight 327 was grounded. Rebecca was called into the compliance office. Grace, the younger attendant, looked confused. Is this real? Danny, another crew member, whispered, It is now. The airline's legal department froze. They hadn't realized who Margaret Ellis was. A retired civil rights attorney. One of the architects of federal aviation equity reform. Media exploded. Elise's post was shared millions of times. Videos surfaced. The industry panicked. Margaret declined interviews. She requested structural review. Policy change. Rebecca was suspended. Danny admitted to complicity through silence. The airline CEO issued a formal apology. Reforms began. Training changed. Margaret consulted quietly. She accepted no award. Justice, she said, was not performance. It was persistence. Rebecca, eventually, sought understanding. She wrote a letter. She entered a restorative justice circle. Margaret handed her a pamphlet titled Witness and Repair. Can I start now? Rebecca asked. You already did, Margaret said. Weeks passed. Rebecca volunteered at a civic center. Elise wrote her final column. Justice isn't a show, Margaret said once. It's a seed. And for those who chose to listen, it began to grow.